604-280-9898. I welcome your thoughts, calls, questions, comments on this topic. Jacob Hunter is my guest, Policy Director, Beyond Prohibition Foundation. Tell me a little bit about Beyond Prohibition Foundation. How long has this organization been around?
Well, we started about a year ago. Kirk Tusaw, who's a lawyer in town, and I were looking at...
Civil liberties?
Yeah, civil liberties. And I'd point out, while I don't speak for the association today, I'm also on the board of the BC Civil Liberties Association. We were looking at the fact that Canada lacks a national organization engaged on lobbying on this very important issue. In the United States, there are 3 organizations doing this work, and in Canada, ultimately, there don't seem to be any. And we've had quite a good result. Our advisory committee is made up of a number of high-profile people, including 2 senators. And what we're ultimately engaged in is trying to convince politicians to accept the science and, frankly, accept the thousands of dollars and millions of dollars in tax revenue that would come around from ending prohibition. Who
are the senators supporting you?
We have support from Pierre-Claude Nolan and from Larry Campbell.
Back with your calls, 604-280-9898. Talking with Jacob Hunter, Policy Director with Beyond Prohibition Foundation. Vancouver Safe Injection Site, or Supervised Injection Site, is going to be able to stay open indefinitely. BC's highest court today rejected an appeal from the federal government, which is seeking to shut down Insight. There is no doubt that the federal government will appeal this to the Supreme Court, although it still has to be decided whether the Supreme Court will hear the appeal.
That's an important thing that is lost on many who are not intimately familiar with the Supreme Court, is they're the one court in the land that gets to choose what they hear. And so there will be a decision by the Supreme Court whether or not they'll hear the appeal sometime in a few months from now.
Let me take some calls, 604-280-9898. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. I'm very surprised by your guest who make all these biased statements. I challenge him to give me one reference of any scientific journal that investigated and concluded that the safe injection site reduces drug use. Also, I would like to get him to answer me this question: how many drug addicts went to the safe injection site, got reference, and quit the drug habit? I bet you there is none.
Okay. Hey, whoa, Peter, give Mr. Hunter a chance to answer those 2 questions.
Well, no, I wish I wish I had a shorter URL, but if you check out VCH, that's vancouvercoastalhealth.ca/SIS/research, you'll find as of 2008, 22 peer-reviewed studies that say exactly what I have been saying. I'd also note that you will not find a single peer-reviewed study that says anything different. The science is universal, not just overwhelming, but universal on this, so much so that when the RCMP funded 4 studies to attempt to dispute Insight, they contracted 3 academics, all of whom produced studies saying Insight was actually working. They then turned to the Drug Prevention Network of Canada and a man named Colin Mangham, who produced, I would not call it a study, it was not published in any peer-reviewed journal, and it is full of, frankly, factual inaccuracies, and I think that is being giving to Mr. Mangham.
Ken, first, no, let me go back. Ken, stay on the line. He also asked you to give us some example of someone or some number of people who have actually been helped by Insight who have gone on to recovery.
Well, I don't have names of individuals. I can certainly point him to that website. There are several studies which examine this exact phenomenon. And I mean, the basis of it is simply that these drug addicts don't have any frontline outreach, and that when going through Insight, they meet healthcare professionals often for the first time who are able to then take them upstairs to on-site and get them off of their addiction. And, you know, I really would point out, check out the website. I mean, it's not just overwhelming. Universal, the science is on Insight.
Give me the website one more time, slowly.
That is vch.ca/SIS/research. Now, you can also, for a little easier, go to whyprohibition.ca. We've got it all up there, too.
Why Prohibition?
Whyprohibition.ca.
That's much easier. Brad.
Yes, good morning. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Sorry for the noise. I'm at work right now. I just wanted to say my little 2 cents on Insight. I'm a recovering heroin addict.
Yeah.
I was addicted for 12 years. Lived down on the streets of down in Maine and Hastings and that. And I used Insight quite a few times, and I got help through Insight. And I've been clean now for just over 3 years. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that it does help people.
How long have you been clean?
Just over 3 years.
Good for you, Brad, and thank you for the call.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
As a matter of fact, Brad, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line if you would, and if you're willing, give Heath your telephone number so that I can contact you in the future if we're doing a program where we're looking for people with your experience. I'd like to be able to contact you. So if you'll stay on the line and chat with Heath, if you're open to that suggestion, I'd appreciate it. Ken.
Hi, Bill. A couple comments. Number one, I think it would be useful for the discussion that we're having that you would have someone else as learned about your colleague there on the other side of the equation, so we can hear both points of view.
Yeah, well, you can program the program another day. I have had on many times the opposing points of view. This guest was booked today based on the court case decision that was expected to be handed down at 9:30 this morning.
Okay, Bill. All I can say is I'm a first-time caller, just coming back to the program. That was my comment. Number two, what I'd like to be able to know is not whether or not after millions and millions and millions of dollars, one or two people have been helped or whatever, but what's the unit cost to help someone? Other organizations in the downtown east side have clearly stated that they can be able to do as good or better work for a fraction of the cost that's there, and they're not being an incubator for future use.
Ken, I appreciate your comment, and I'm going to ask Jacob for his response in a minute, but first, Terry Shintz with breaking news. Talking with Jacob Hunter, Policy Director, Beyond Prohibition Foundation, to Ken's comment that there are others who could do the same work for much less money.
Well, I think, what Ken said there was, first of all, he's speaking about the amount of money spent on Insight. It's important to note that for every dollar spent on Insight, it saves $4 in policing and healthcare costs. This is a result of one of the peer-reviewed studies on Insight. And another thing I'd point out that harm reduction programs like Insight, but Insight is only one of them, receive only 2% of anti-drug funding. 73% goes to the police. I would love to see evidence that policing is working. After 75 years, drugs are as available as ever. More available, exactly. So, ultimately, are there other groups that could do what Insight did? I would ask, where were they until Insight opened?
Russ, good morning. Russ, are you there? Don't know what's happened to Russ. Amy.
Yes, I'd like your guest to answer where these drug addicts are getting the money, because he's talking about what it's doing. How they get their money illegally, break and enter, all these things, because these drugs, where do they get the money to pay for these drugs that they're shooting up at Insight? So if he's saying it's harm reduction, crime reduction, I question that. What's his account on this?
No, I think that's a reasonable concern, at least. The fact is that most of the people who are going to Insight are going there with drugs that are illicit drugs that have been gotten illegally, because Insight's not supplying the drugs. That's a legitimate concern.
Absolutely it is. And in fact, she's correct that they are buying these drugs by committing crimes. I would point out, though, these drugs are only expensive because they are controlled by organized crime. We know that the price of opiates is actually quite low, and that's what's being injected there. They do not cost very much to grow. They are a plant, after all. And what we see around the world is that this prohibition is enriching the Taliban in Afghanistan, who then turn around and sell it to organized criminals here, who sell it at an extreme price to addicts, who are forced to break into homes and steal to support that addiction.
So what you would really like to see, and we only have about 40 seconds left, you would like to see a system whereby people who have an addiction to drugs are supplied the drugs, prescribed the drugs as part of a program to try to wean them off the drugs, presumably.
Exactly. Ultimately, what we need to see is a source where true addicts can get these drugs outside of the black market so they're not stealing. And there are several research programs in effect right now which have shown to lower the crime rate even further than Insight by actually prescribing heroin to addicts. And I'd point out those programs have shown a decrease in the level of addiction. The people who are given free heroin lower their dose by themselves over time.
Well, thanks to Jacob Hunter. When we